Welcome back to the CTO Playbook, the podcast dedicated to helping CTOs excel. What if the future of startups isn't decided by who builds the flashiest AI, but by who solves the right problems? In this episode, I'm joined once again by my friend Thorgeir Einarsson, almost a year since we last spoke, to unpack how funding, AI, and investor expectations have shifted. From hype cycles to hard realities, this conversation reveals what really matters when building in uncertain times and where the smartest opportunities are emerging. I'm your host, Adam Horner, coach to CTOs from startups to enterprises, helping you lead with clarity, confidence, and strategic impact. If you've ever felt like you're figuring it out the hard way, you're not alone. That's why I created the CTO Playbook, a podcast and platform built for tech leaders just like you. Explore coaching, cohorts, and more at thectoplaybook.com. Your path, your pace, your playbook. So let's step into the conversation. Thorgeir, welcome back to the show. It's been almost a year since we recorded episode 17, and hasn't the time just flown by?
This happens when you have fun.
I always think it gets faster as you get older as well for some reason. I'm not sure if that's actually true.
Let's not talk about that.
So, Thorgeir, I just wanted to start off by asking you how you think the funding environment for startups and scale-ups has changed, well, pretty much globally compared to when we spoke a year ago, and if there's any particular winners or losers that you've seen over that time.
Right. Well, I think it was pretty bad 2022 through to 2024. And I think this year is starting to pick up. Now, of course, you can't have a conversation these days without mentioning these two letters, AI. But I think the numbers are a little bit skewed because of these massive rounds that OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on did.
Right.
But if you look at the underlying trend, of course, there's a huge interest in it. I think there was actually an interview that Creandum, a famous Swedish VC, did for Bloomberg. Was it last week? They've actually had this top 50 seed companies. And the interviewer said, well, look, looks like 90% of them are AI. He says, yeah, that's where things are going. And said, isn't that a bit of a bubble? I said, well, yeah, I guess. So there's a lot of interest, of course, but there is also some, should we say, sobering factors playing in that. Gone are these crazy valuations, except for, as I said, these large language models and so on. Other than that, I think most companies now have to provide still a solution that solves a real problem. They still have to show traction. They still have to prove that they have the understanding of that market. So pre-revenue, pre-product, super, super hard, unless you are a super team that have done it before and people invest in you.
The track record still counts just as strongly as it always did then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think the raw numbers are down, actually in a year or flat. Again, you have to take away these huge numbers that kind of skews the picture. But people are very, very careful. I think especially pre-seed and seed, it's really, really hard. People are choosing to go on for longer to get to some sort of numbers to show that, we have customers, we have users, it actually is working. So I think the sobering effect after these crazy years is still there.
So from that perspective, it doesn't look as much like a bubble then. When you're mentioning bubble, often you think, well, people are investing without due diligence or without care for the underlying numbers and sort of competing against each other as investors. But what you're saying doesn't seem to sort of match with that picture.
No, but I mean, again, because nobody knows exactly how this AI is going to play out in terms of real sort of financial, numbers, return on investments. And that was for everything, I think, except for those businesses today that are showing an absolute, rocket business like Lovable and Repeat and those. But then on the flip side of that, I mean, if you wouldn't be skeptical, yes, the churn is very high. These are areas that probably will be eclipsed by some of the big, gorilla companies, these generic models and so on. But I think if you look at some of those people doing AI within legal, or certain specific deep verticals and have traction, I think they really are on a rip. So it's a mixed bag, really. I would say that in general, the good old basics is still true. Have a product, solves a real problem, have real customers and so on and so forth. I think the debate is a little bit more, is it a native AI play right now, or is it a mixed bag between SaaS kind of embellished by AI, and what does that look like? Agentic, is that really going to take off? I mean, that's kind of the debate going on right now. And I think a lot of people are making investments in a number of customers or companies that might even compete with one another. That's kind of a new thing.
Oh, okay. So where they've got a portfolio that's very tightly aligned, but therefore overlapping one startup to another within that.
Yeah, I think so, because it's, again, because this is such a industrial revolution with AI that it's hard to kind of pick the winners. Whereas before it was a bit like, you're 15, 20 years into SaaS, you know pretty much now what a good SaaS company looks like. We don't really know what a great AI company looks like yet. So it's speculative in that sense. But smaller check sizes just to get him on board, see what happens.
Right. So people paying for options at this point from the VC perspective then.
Yeah. But for sure, I mean, the AI application layer seems to be where the real interest is. I mean, LLMs, foundational models, hardware, chips, and so on and so forth, that's already taken care of, if you like. Money's being plowed into them by companies who already have their own cash flow, right? So, but if you look at the pure kind of angel seed investors, Series A investors, they seem to be interested very much in the application. I was speaking to one VC who's basically would not at all interested in generic models, even code generators and so on. We really want to see kind of like SaaS, verticalized, specialized, and that's where we think we can see the wins. So yeah, so that's right. The other thing, of course, is that maybe we need less money to just get to that next milestone because of AI being used by produce products, MVPs, but also to go out and start doing, outreach using AI agents and so on and so forth. So it really is a flux right now. It's really hard to say.
Okay. So we're in crystal ball territory.
Absolutely. It's anyone's opinion, really. So I guess what the most important thing, though, is that if you are in the game, and you want to be in the arena, I mean, you got to get out there and get dirty. You got to make some investments. If you're an entrepreneur, you have to just apply yourself in this AI game, even if a lot of it is experimental. I mean, I have my own opinions about what I guess will work out in the end. We can talk about that a little bit, but I mean, it's in general, I think it's very much like you're in experimental mode right now.
And AI, as you mentioned, is dominating the buzzwords and also the investment thesis of pretty much every investment house there is, whether they're private equity or venture capital or even corporate venture capital. But one of the things that we spoke about, a few years ago was this idea that the rise of hardware, that hardware would become a more important component of both startups and also innovation in general. Now, the only really tangible thing that I've seen from that is sort of military startup or military applications of stuff where hardware for war and the warfighter in general does seem to be picking up. But is that reflected in the kinds of things that you're seeing as well? That hardware has really just niched down into military? Yeah,
I mean, I happen to be engaged with some defense tech companies, hardware and software, and so I can see it firsthand that the magic of vertical integration between software and hardware is super magical, especially when the hardware matters in terms of its should we say, ability to be granular and correct. Right. And the interesting thing is even, again, what's the kind of interface between hardware and software? Because we're now seeing also hardware, so software kind of as firmware, as very close to the metal, if you like. And that area as well, I mean, you need to be fairly vertical to start building those kind of solutions. But I think this is another thing in Europe that probably Europe has an edge a little bit, is this deep tech area. We are very good at it. I mean, we've always been very good at building stuff in Europe, not maybe as good as selling it. So the deep tech, and I think dual use is also the thing that a lot of investors never wanted to invest in defense tech before, or war tech, maybe we should call it these days. But now also with the dual use that we're seeing coming out of most applications, it's become definitely kosher or halal to invest in these products right now. But I think also if you look at medical devices, healthcare, that's also a huge area of combination of hardware and software. Yeah, I think the key thing there for us as an entrepreneur is to understand how to communicate that to an investor, that how much of this hardware will drive a sort of capital just to kind of manufacture and distribute and so on. How can you come up with a business model that somehow allows you to maybe contract out some of the manufacturing and not having to build massive capex initiatives to sort of get it off the ground. So there's always still that kind of friction when it comes to hardware businesses. However, the moats that you can build is really, really hard to compete with. So it's if you can get it right, it's a fantastic business, I think, in this time of anybody can write software, just using English language, but not everybody can just build a high-tech device that is managed by software.
Because that often requires an element of domain knowledge as well as that tricky interface. I mean, you called it the firmware, but essentially it's the combination of the software being able to drive components in the hardware, or the hardware being able to drive data back to some sort of cloud service, which provides that, the verticalized integration of the solution.
Exactly. I mean, but let's not forget, some of the most valuable companies today are hardware companies, right? NVIDIA, who are building a lot of great software as well. People don't talk so much about that, but Apple, of course, but even Google and Microsoft have hardware, right? Meta is coming up with their Ray-Ban AR, VR glasses very soon. So if you want to build a really valuable company, hardware is not a bad idea. It's just getting there. Everybody knows that the whole EV evolution wouldn't have happened without state sponsorship. It's not just in China, and Tesla wouldn't be around if they didn't have a lot of the sponsorship from the US government, right, to build the factories and so on and so forth. So It's just that. But I think somehow we're all kind of like gadget lovers, a little bit, aren't we? We love the guy. It's amazing to see when you actually come up with a beautiful industrial design or consumer design with software and hardware working really nicely together. And this is why we still, for some reason, keep upgrading our iPhones, right? Because it is quite nice.
How much better can it work together? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's hard. Hardware is hard and all that stuff. But but I think we're seeing some investors who definitely are now gravitating towards that, whereas before they were totally not interested at all.
Yeah. I think there's also an element of some performance playing out where hardware has enabled a startup or a scale up to be able to create not just a differentiated product, which is hard enough to do in the first place, but now actually be able to build like a data platform or a unique platform on top of that, which either has an element of lock-in, in other words, it's very difficult to migrate from that to another one, or has a level of uniqueness that is hard to copy. So creating sort of moat, which any kind of moat is interesting to the investors because they sort of see something that's difficult to copy and therefore profits for a number of years until others can catch up to it.
Yes.
So, I mean, does that sort of also indicate then that we're seeing a bit of a difference between the kinds of companies and therefore who backs them, VC versus, sort of venture capital versus private equity versus those organizations who are able to bootstrap, and then also the many, many, many thousands of small lifestyle businesses or sort of solopreneur type businesses.
Yes.
I mean, do you think that the ratio of those is shifting significantly at all over the recent sort of time?
There's a number of trends going on here. I mean, if we start at the sort of bottom, I guess, bootstrapped software companies using all these various coding tools to get something out of the door really quickly. I mean, that's mushrooming, right? It's everywhere. And everybody will realize or are realizing that building the product wasn't really the main effort. Selling it is the hard part, right? Yeah. I mean, even some products that you think, well, it's been designed as a self-service, it doesn't sell itself, right? You still have to kind of book meetings and explain it and all that sort of stuff. So that's at that end. But that's a wonderful opportunity, I think, for companies to really come quite a way with, family, friends and fools kind of money and maybe some angel money as well. But then if you move to the next step up, when we talk about a little bit more, like you say, the hardware and with software, I mean, in Europe, we have the EIC is more active than ever,
That's the European Innovation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They have both grants, they have blended finance, they match whatever you come up with, but even they can be the first check-in as well, as long as you can show a technology readiness level. So, but you should use somebody helping you to do that because it takes a lot of time to fill those forms in. I mean, I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest. I think, should try to get, commercial traction and find commercial investors. But it's, it's just a top up, it's great for that. Now, I also wanted to mention that a lot of VCs now, you talk VCs and private equity, a lot of VCs are kind of changing the charter now to become kind of a combo of the both.
Interesting.
So, I mean,
what's driving that?
something so, at the end of the dot-com crash, where I was, alive and kicking then, we had a lot of these roll-ups, where companies went in and said, well, the kind of zombie companies, or companies who they might have had like 1,000 customers, but they weren't growing anymore, right? But they're still an asset for a company that says, look, I'm going to buy that customer base. Maybe it's in a region that, we don't have anything, but we can then basically do cross-selling and upselling of something else. So the whole idea of private equity having a platform and start adding, say HR, you got a recruitment, you got some, performance, people analytics company, whatever. They just add it up and all of a sudden you have a suite. And then on top of that, what differs today from what's back in the early 2000s is that now we can take those companies and AI-fy them. We can take them through a kind of a transformation of making them much more modern. It was interesting, actually. Constellation Software, which is the biggest conglomerate of vertical SaaS companies in the world, Canadian company, had a conference call because their stock started going down. And I'm in stock. It's a fantastic share to own. I've owned it for many, many years. This goes up, up, up. And all of a sudden, it dropped 20%. And the CEO had to call for a conference call with their hundreds of thousands of shareholders to have a talk about how do our small vertical SaaS companies survive AI, right? Are they going to be eclipsed and overtaken, whatever, made irrelevant?
Yeah.
And after that call, stock actually kept dropping. Now it's stabilized a bit. But it just goes to show that I believe that it's a huge value in taking existing SaaS companies and bundling them together, and putting a nice AI layer around it, and then gradually making them more and more automated, if you like. Because it doesn't happen overnight. I think here's the thing as well, which even if you have the technology today to automate a process completely, we as humans, we don't move that fast. It's quite, we operate in kind of old habits and so on. So even if you went and said, look, I can automate your whole, purchasing department, from receiving, an invoice, matching it to a purchase order and paying it and following up. People say, "Well, hang on a second, let's go easy here, shall we? We can't make any mistakes," and so on. So that actually gives a bit of time for companies that have these applications just to gradually improve them with AI. But we're seeing investors now who are saying, "Look, let's buy those companies." I mean, all of a sudden, they used to be maybe 5, 10x revenue, and now maybe they're 2x, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them are not growing, but they're kind of profitable, right? So there's a huge opportunity there. So we're seeing that happening. And then you have the usual stuff, of course, with companies who are rocketing, taking off and so on and so forth. And all the usual suspects, of course, are funding them. And again, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 will make it really big, and others will go by the wayside, right? VC model.
Yeah. So that fundamentally then the VC model hasn't spectacularly changed. The risk appetite of VC investors does seem to change, and the thesis is a bit more up in the air. In other words, it seems to be sort of varied and all over the place. It's not like everybody's playing from the same SaaS playbook.
No, but I think a lot of VCs are moving gradually away from this, winner takes it all. Like, let's invest in 20 companies. Let's hope one makes it and that'll pay for the rest. I think they are realizing that, maybe it's a good idea to have a little bit more of a balanced approach where we have these other companies, we'll take care of them, and we'll see how we can make them win in the age of AI. Because if they have domain expertise, they have customers, these are the two hardest things, to get, so if they have reached some, that's a good start, right? To then say, well, how do we take their products, make them better, replace them, or take their knowledge graph, for instance, take their data and start, training this model on that data and come up with 2.0 of their versions. I think that's a lot of stuff that makes a lot of sense to me to do that. Why would you want to start from absolute scratch with something if you could start with all that knowledge, So I think some of these are becoming much more rounded in that sense. I mean, to be honest, a lot of them, of course, have not shown good distribution, right? In the last, the vintage 2020 to 2024 has been awful. I mean, very few people have been delivering, a DPI as a cash back to their LPs. So, a lot of VCs have just stopped operation, right? And
there's a number of funds that I've seen that have folded, and others are just frozen.
Yeah, and I mean, so you got to wonder, like, should we just do a massive secondary of the whole fund to somebody else who will then take all that knowledge, customers, and then they say, no, should we do it ourselves? But you have to change the mandate. You have to go back and say, look, we didn't succeed.
Got it. And that's what's driving this sort of PE-ification of VC.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's kind of, the whole thing is evolving. We're learning. We're finding out that, investing, I mean, it doesn't just go up, right? And now we have this a new industrial revolution of this technology where everybody's scratching their head thinking, well, what does that mean? So again, my own belief is that we are going to see great companies applying traditional deterministic logic, great databases, problem orientation with applications of AI to improve workflows, to make them more automatic, to make one person be able to do the work of 10. Definitely, this is definitely happening gradually. There's some resistance to that, of course, because it's more regulatory and certain countries it's so hard to kind of shrink that fast. But I think this is what we're seeing.
So it's almost like the carve out that we're seeing in the industrial revolution when robots started to replace people on the factory floor and automation of manufacturing drove a huge increase in the sort of leverage of each person working in the factory, but then also at the same time drove a huge reduction in the number of people actually required to produce the same amount of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I think that, yeah, exactly. I think that one big difference there, of course, is we're talking blue collar versus white collar. Now we have a situation where people probably, I mean, this is maybe a little bit being a bit harsh, saying that a lot of people have been hiding in companies, pretending to work, right, in large corporations, going to meetings and looking busy, actually not adding much value. I mean, we've seen this, was it 4 or 5 years ago when Google and Meta and all that basically shedded, was it 20%, 30%, and revenue kept going up, right? So obviously there was a lot of people, sitting on the roof playing, Counter-Strike or something. Battleship. So that's basically is going to go away. Interestingly enough, I was speaking to the head of a huge small business association that have hundreds of thousands of members, who said to me that they expect an influx of new members simply because so many people are now losing their jobs in large corporates and they're not going to get another job, right? So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to start a company, right? We saw the same thing when Nokia kind of went under in the 2000s and then in the noughties. That's spawned a lot of fantastic companies, like from Finland, like Rovio and Supercell and all those companies. Fantastic engineers came from Nokia. And what did they do? Well, they didn't go, it wasn't another job to have, not least in Finland at the time. Well, you can go work in the sort of forest industry. No, so they started companies, right? Which was amazing for the Finnish economy. So
you think there's a potential that we start to see the same kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we might see a lot of these bootstrap companies coming up. And here are people then will come from an organization maybe where they see that, look, I used to do this job and it should be done much easier, much faster, much better. They have the domain knowledge and so on.
So basically selling a solution back into their old employer in the area that they were working in. Interesting.
Yes,
that would lead me to sort of to think then that there's probably going to be certain countries that win from that, where perhaps the regulation and how easy it is to set up a business and how much red tape there is to bureaucracy is relatively low. Sweden, for example, is quite a good example of that. And then other areas where the amount of bureaucracy and red tape to start a company and run it successfully is incredibly high. And I'm thinking immediately of Germany, where it's almost a running joke how hard it is to run a small business in Germany.
I don't understand. Honestly, I don't understand politicians in some of these countries. They really have to wake up and smell their coffee, because I was in Germany just recently in this GTEx tech show in Berlin. And I met a lot of startups, and they are incorporating in Estonia, in Dubai, in Doha, Malta, Cyprus. And I think, gosh, all these brains, I mean, there's kind of like a brain drain going on. But in this case, the brain drain is like a company startup brain drain. So the people that still work maybe benefiting from all the social benefits that you get in Germany, for instance, if you have children and so on and so forth. But the companies, the IP is not going to go in Germany, right? It's going elsewhere. I mean, the most aggressive,
and to some degree, some of the tax dollars are going to those countries that are hosting the good regulations that enable quick company setup and low overheads for running a small business.
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend here from India who came here. We worked with a startup. And he got his visa rejected because he was upgraded to a C-level position. And the visa here in Sweden said, well, no, you don't have visa for that. So he had to leave, went to London, sold the company. Wow. he made a bit of had a payday, and I guess the tax money went to the UK instead of here. No, I mean, in general, I think it's a big wake up call for all European politicians to say, look, I think you should give like a holiday of 5 years for corporation tax, for social benefits and all these sort of things, and just streamline it for startups. Because you're going to have people losing their jobs. They want to start a company. Do you want them to start a company in your country or go somewhere else, right? And I think this will create a whole fishing pond of fantastic companies in years to come. Look, Klarna just went IPO in New York. These guys, 20 years ago were basically students out of a business school right in Stockholm, and they go IPO in New York. Fantastic for them, right? Great. But, why not in Stockholm Stock Exchange, right?
And I heard that Lovable just relocated to Delaware as a Delaware corporation as well.
There you go. I mean, we have a Sana in Sweden as well. Great AI company. And Workday just picked them up for $1 billion. And so it's a little bit sad that we're not able to but that's another completely different topic. I mean, everybody's happy in terms of the investors, of course, are happy, employees hopefully get the stock options. Although the stock options is another issue in most of the European countries, that they're not really that tax efficient, Anyway, so we have a lot of work to do on that side, but I think it's the whole, entrepreneurs are kind of borderless. They'll go wherever the friction is the least.
And that seems to be increasingly the case, doesn't it?
Yeah. And investors, I think, are the same in a way, right? So their money will flow wherever. I mean, I know, for instance, now Qatar has this $3 million, I think, dilution-free investment if you bring your tech team down there. And, I mean, maybe not everybody wants to live in the Middle East, but, it's quite tempting. Great living standards, you get a lot of, tax benefits and why not for a few years, get it going, whatever. So, I mean, that's what we're competing with. Everybody's is from a country point of view. Then I guess there's more to life than work and so on and so forth. But when you are running a startup, it tends to take over your life for quite a few years, right?
So it is consuming.
It is. So even with AI, I would say this, and automation and so on, it's always been true that even if you have tools, it's not like you're going to work less. You just have higher output. But the exciting thing when you see all these tools, and I'm sure most people listening to this are working with a number of these tools, it's amazing how much you can get done. But it doesn't mean that you stop working, at 6 or 7. You just keep going, you eat, and then you go back again. So it's just productivity is crazy. Probably will drive down inflation as well. I'm absolutely sure it will.
But then once everything normalizes to it, then it will have been a weird inflection point in history. But then the world will normalize to it. And I think that's one of those things that people sort of, with the utopia dreams, seem to be forgetting, in that, once people can realize that they can do more, or they could sit back and go to the beach. Well, the guy next door to you, he's going to put in the extra hours and get the extra productivity and keep pushing themselves just as hard. So it will normalize that everyone just gets more done in the same amount of time, rather than humanity ending up with everybody twiddling their thumbs with Mai Tais, wondering what they should be doing while they're sat on the very hot beach. So I think that's one of those interesting things that people tend to forget when say, oh, this is going to change productivity, it's going to change everything. It may do short term, may create imbalances, it'll create an arbitrage, but it's unlikely to change the nature of people. People want to work for value, and that's not going to change too much.
No. I think, the area which I'm kind of waiting for to take off as well, as in terms of startups or as an investment theme, is AI safety and AI security. For some reason, we're still, there are some doomsayers and so on. Agentic AI is going to be out of control and all that stuff. I think Anthropic are probably the company that's most sincere about creating guardrails and building models to understand the models. But I'm a little bit perplexed over, use the word, why there isn't more interest and more kind of, how do we build these guardrails? We are extremely excited about agentic workflows, automated and so on and so forth, which is kind of like a service. This goes back to, the web services and SOA back in the day, but with a lot of crazy dogs running around barking up all sorts of trees. We don't know what's going to happen here, right? Who's going to get bitten by these crazy agents? And I'm surprised that nobody is working on frameworks on this. This is a startup opportunity in its own right. Just like cybersecurity came about once we had PCs, right? People didn't think about these, viruses. It's like a joke. What do you mean viruses? And now, of course, it's not a joke. Everybody knows it's like, your websites, it's being constantly probed by bots, right? Now, when these bots are AI driven and they leak and whatever, so I think this is the huge area of concern that I'm just wondering who's going to step up and start producing kind of AI as the category, because without it, we just can't unleash these AI agents. I don't know what you think about that, Adam. I mean,
I think exactly what you just said. For me, generally, what it is, it's necessity that is the mother of most invention. And I think when you end up with the point where it becomes necessary, that it actually is a tangible bottleneck, then people will notice. I think at the moment it's a little bit like everybody's been released onto the Wild West. People, as you say, they've got their cart, they've got their pickaxes, and they're just driving all over the place looking for gold. Until it becomes clear that, okay, there's gold only in a few creeks over here, we need to get access to those creeks, and there's security aspects for going through there. I think then people start realizing, okay, now we need some guardrails, now we need some safety to stop people from falling in the water and drowning, or whatever the challenge might be, falling off.
It feels a bit like, I was just recently reading, Patagonia founder's book. I think he's written a couple, but basically it's a whole story, how he wanted to have, responsible climbing and responsible clothing and all that sort of stuff. And everything he says is like, absolutely, of course this should work like this. Why doesn't everybody work like this? And you start thinking about when we started producing electricity back in the 60s and 70s, and we basically dammed up rivers, and we did logging and all this stuff, and nobody thought about, well, what's the consequence of that? What about the fishes? What about nature? What about the whole ecosystem? I will think about it later on. We're on an industrial kind of growth curve here, and I feel the same now in a way. The energy that we're using for AI.
The demand to power the data centers. You mean in terms of electricity?
Exactly. Never mind the risk for us humans, but so on. But it's almost like we don't have time to think about that stuff. And I'm just think that in a way is a startup opportunity. Just like climate tech is of course should be at the forefront as well. I mean, today I met an entrepreneur who's invented a much more efficient cooler for data centers using, I'm not going to spill beans here, how they do it. But basically it's reducing the electricity by 20% because it's much more efficient cooling center, right? That in itself is huge in terms of the energy, because energy is now the power factor, for countries. Who's got the power? The ones who's got the power, it's got the power, right? So anyway, so these are the bigger pictures. I think that as you get older, you sort of think a little bit more zooming out, thinking, okay, what does this all mean? And if you want to be an entrepreneur, and if you want to have some kind of social responsibility in it, I think your company will be much more valuable, and you will attract more investors as well, because it will. I mean, we see family offices, for instance, investing. Maybe they made their money in oil or whatever, and they feel like they need to now invest in, say, climate tech or something meaningful. Or we're seeing people who maybe made a lot of money in mobile phones, for instance, maybe feel like maybe we need to invest in something that actually helps the generation not to become totally screen addicted. Right. So I think it is an interesting aspect of your business plan and your idea to have something that actually is sustainable, or that thinks a little bit more than just 3 years ahead, and maybe thinks, well, what about 30 years ahead or 50 years ahead,
Right. So this is sort of often bundled together under the sort of corporate responsibility or social responsibility aspects of businesses, which is kind of really fallen out of favor, especially in the US, where it's sort of politically not an option to be talked about, certainly not openly anymore. Do you think that's having an impact on the way that businesses are actually looking to position and present themselves in different areas? Because it seems like what you've just mentioned is sort of, Middle East and Europe, more conscious, more aware of people and planets, species and planets. Whereas in the US, it's almost like it's become a taboo subject.
Yeah, and I think it's fallen on its own kind of grip, because the whole CSR and so on was basically just a lot of greenwashing. It wasn't really sincere. Right. Unless you're a Patagonia, or really, I mean, everyone should read his book. I don't remember his name now. He shows how to do it, right? And the thing is, the product is better. If once you buy, Patagonia, you have it for life. And the whole idea is, if it breaks, you can send it back to them. They'll fix it, right? It's good for business, right? It is. So if it has a real purpose, that it's like interwoven into your business idea, I think that's the key thing here. And so in a sense, it's not an add-on. It's not like an afterthought. It's not like by the way, no, it's actually, we have a product here that actually is fantastic ROI. It solves a lot of problems. And you know what? Makes people happier. It works well in the environment. I think if you have a product like that, not only is it more fun to work in a company like that, you will attract more money. You will make more money. Now, it's not easy to find, maybe, but you should definitely ask yourself the question, if I am only doing something which is a short-term solve the problem, and I don't really care about all the other stuff, I don't know if that's going to make you happy.
Long-term. Yeah.
No, because that's the other thing as well, right? You want to spend your heartbeats on stuff that makes you, gives you, makes you feel good. And we know that things that makes you feel good is do stuff that help other people in the end.
Yeah. And I think that's also one of those things, an interesting generational difference. I mean, I think the book you're talking about is by Yvon Chouinard. It's Let My People Go Surfing. Is that the one?
That's it. That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah. It is an amazing story. And I think it is a really good example of a mission-based company who have a product that just happens to be outdoor equipment, but because the mission of the company, yes, it's related to that, but it's not. It doesn't seem like a direct correlation until you look below the surface and understand how the company.
And the funny thing is, Patagonia vest. This is like the standard attire for VCs in Silicon Valley.
The irony is not lost on me. It's a brilliant one. Talking about VCs in Silicon Valley, then, and talking about how we raise money to run our businesses. Do you think the way that businesses go out and pitch for investment has changed then over the last few years? Because I know you're running, Pitchago, which essentially is a service to advise startups on what they're missing and what they're lacking. So I know that you're at the forefront of this, but do you think the actual process and the approach that companies go and pitch for investment, do you think that has actually fundamentally changed over the last few years?
I think we're still very high on pitch decks. Send me the deck, and the deck is everything. Now, and VCs, typical VC will receive 2,000, 3,000 of them, and they're using AI to analyze them or whatever and so on. And maybe they meet, take a meeting with 10%, and maybe 20% of those, end up having a second meeting, and maybe, 20% of those actually end up having a third meeting, and maybe 20% of those get a check. It's brutal, right? It's really brutal that 1%, 2%, 3% of everyone gets a proper funding. And so for me, in a way, the deck is it's important, right? It's part of your storytelling. And without storytelling, nobody knows who you are, what you do. So you need to be able to communicate who you are. But, it's once if you think of it as a storefront, once you go into your store, you obviously want to, not be disappointed, So it's not like just a brochure and now here's the reality. It's all, a mess. So for me, it's a bit like, I think of this as, the preparation is everything. I heard this saying of, luck comes to the prepared mind. It's so important to prepare. It's just like in sports where practice and, understand what you're getting into. And as we were talking about Patagonia, we can use this analogy. Of course, if you're going to climb a mountain, which is kind of like a startup, base camp 1 might be your pre-seed, base camp 2 is your seed, and base camp, 3 is Series A, and then the summit, right? Which is exit maybe, or, you start by, you start expanding the whole mountain range by companies. So what is it that we do when we go climbing? Well, we start doing a checklist, right? We check, have we got everything that we need? We start talking to other people that's been up that mountain or similar mountains. We ask about, what kind of clothing do you need? What kind of, do you need oxygen on this one? What kind of weather? What time of the year is the best to go? Et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with fundraising. So prepare. So Pitchago was really born out of this whole idea of like a massive manifest of checklist, right?
Right.
Now, most people are like eager to get going, right? Well, we should be going already. We should already be, a kilometer on the way.
In front of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And the others, wait. Before we start, let's just make sure we have, because once you get started, it's hard to, oh my God, you know what? We forgot. Can you run down and get that oxygen? First, we forgot, we're at like, 5,000 meters now. It's hard to breathe. So it's a good thing to prepare. And I think also reflect a little bit over like asking yourself the tough questions. Well, have we really understood this customer's problem? are we assuming that we understand it? Have we spoken to enough people? Have we really understood, where should we start finding those first 10 customers? When is it time to really start pushing, sales and marketing? There's a lot of stuff, have we really got the right tech stack here? Is that really what we need? So it's good to think a little bit, I've seen companies come far, far down the road and realize that, we shouldn't have, we made a decision some time ago, and now we're having to replace certain pieces of our ship. So it's preparation. And I think for us, we're seeing that a lot of people are having difficulty with it, actually. Now, if you join an accelerator, that is actually a great way to become organized, because now you have this 3-month plan maybe before demo day, and they will basically take you through a structure. You just like go to school or whatever,
Yeah.
Or if you join the SEALs, it's not like you can just goof around, right? There are certain things you must learn how to do. I think you have to be able to do 10 or 20 push-ups and at least 3 or 4 chin-ups, just to be, to be interviewed. But when you come out of it, you should 10x on those things, right? That's the idea. Yeah. And the only way to do that is you got to practice. So I think this is an area of what we call entrepreneurial discipline, which is missing in many, many cases. Simply because
that's because it comes down to ignorance, does it not? Because startup founders sort of see the glossy outside of it, but don't see the hard work that goes on underneath it before they get to that pitch deck. They just look at, look, here's a pitch deck that worked for Airbnb. Here's a pitch deck that worked for them. But why is the bit that's often missing?
I know. This is this whole joke about, overnight success that took 10 years. But it is this whole idea, and I might have said it when we spoke last time, but instead of just taking the pig, put in lipstick on the pig, let's take the pig to the gym, let's build some muscle, and when we go out, we're kind of confident. We have an idea of any questions that will come out of us. So as we built Pitchago, it basically has all the investor questions you can imagine, right? And some of them are quite, hard, and some of them do require you to go back and say, okay, fine, we haven't thought about that. Or maybe you should think about that. Or maybe you could just realize that that's an area where we actually have work to be done, and we can be honest about it. We have not sorted that out yet, but that's fine. And know thyself is a key thing in life, right? So understand who you are. Where are my strengths, my weaknesses? That's a good start, right?
Yeah,
and then you can start working from there. Say like, okay, I need to improve my this part of my business, or myself, or my team, or whatever it might be. So it's multi faceted thing. Startups. It's definitely not easy, and not for everyone.
And this is it. Not every company should be a startup business. And a startup business is a business in search of a business model. Some businesses actually already have a reasonable business model. It just isn't one that scales at 30 times over 4 years or whatever it might be.
No. And not everybody is made to be a founder or a founder team and so on. A lot of startups fail because founders give up on each other, give up on the business, or give up on each other because they don't realize that this is much harder than a marriage, actually. And you are also experimenting. It's an experimentation. A business idea, a startup is like you actually have some assumptions, you go test it. Wasn't exactly what we hoped for. We had to go back and change. And sometimes it's called the pivot because you're changing a lot, right? And it's very taxing on you as an individual. And on top of that, if you have a co-founder that just had a baby, for instance, or somebody, some other personal big thing, maybe their mom or dad passed away or something like that in the middle of this. So, I always recommend to have co-founders for a number of reasons. One is that it's not just the skills levels, it's obvious, right? But also for your energy levels and to support each other through things that happen in life.
Yeah.
I think I saw some chart that shows that it was like 50 or 100 very successful companies. And it did show that a lot of them had founders that knew each other from school or from university or from previous jobs as colleagues, which kind of, they went into it knowing each other quite well. The good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
I've had experience with falling out with co-founders. I know firsthand. And I can say this, that you have to have an extremely open and transparent situation where you can argue hard about certain things and loud, but you are allowing that. It's very functional as founders to do that. You come out of it and you hug each other and say, okay, fine, that was a good debate. now let's do this now, right? So you're allowing each other to have different ideas and opinions and so on. I think it's one of the most healthiest thing you can have is teams, 2 or 3 that really can gel together and handle this craziness that is startup, for many years.
It's a long commitment, isn't it?
I would say this: if you want to find out whether or not you can work together, go on a sailing trip for 2 or 3 weeks together, where it's windy, tough weather, and so on and so forth. You can have a skipper with you, can help you, because you're in a small space for quite a long time, and you need to get on with each other and see how you react during some testing times. I've done exactly this one. And I thought I knew some of these guys, and I realized that some of them had certain personality traits that I didn't realize. I saw it come out on that trip. So this is the number one area, and this is why we start off as well. The 2 areas we talk about that are extremely key to prepare and understand is your business model.
Yeah.
What is the thing, the problem solution, and the team makeup. The people that you have there, and then also saw things around that. Of course, that for instance, if a co-founder jumps ship after 12 months, and of course you should have had a way where shares keep coming back. So you have vesting and all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff underneath the surface as well that you need to sort out.
Yeah. Okay, so Pitchago helps you not only with the pitch, but also helping all the questions of, basically running the business after you've won the pitch. Hopefully you do win it, but such that you got an idea of, well, this is what the work is going to look like, as well as what the success is going to look like. And we've got the stamina to keep going, as well as conditions, the preconditions to enable it to.
It is investment preparation, readiness. It's kind of like your own pre-diligence. So let's check ourselves first. Like, are we ready?
That's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah. And then, of course, the story, how do we present ourselves? Well, that's the deck and all that stuff. Should hopefully also be, representative of, who you are. So it's not just like you're putting a mask on, you say, this is us. And I always coach founders and say, look, you don't want to pretend, in front of investors, because then you have to pretend forever, whenever you meet them. No, you have to say, this is who I am, this is who we are, we're good at this, where's some areas of improvement. And we hope that you, investor, as you come in, whether it's an angel or will help us, you challenge us, support us, be part of the journey. That's healthy. There's some investors, depending if they've been founders themselves, this is the best, because then they know all that stuff already. If they're bankers or just been, administrators, Excel, jockeys, it's hard. It's really hard to have investors
knowing
like
who
that.
your audience is as you pitch is just as important as having the preparation done correctly first. What to ask for and how to ask for it.
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of founders who have had the kind of wrong investors, meaning investors who don't really understand how hard it is. It's one thing struggling every day with, product, customers, and all that stuff, and money, cash flow. And then on top of that, having to explain all that stuff to somebody at the board who doesn't really get it. It's
so you want to have a position that's counter to what you believe in.
Yeah. You want
been there, done that.
Here's the test. If you listen to this, and if you are a founder, and if you know exactly what I mean. If you're looking forward to the board meeting, gosh, it's going to be fantastic. We're going to have some good strategic conversations. I can share a lot of this stuff. It's almost like a therapeutic session for me. I'm going to come out of that with both, tough love and all that stuff. It's going to be great. Or if you're like, oh my God, another one. I've sent out the pack. Nobody read it. They ask idiotic questions. And worst of all, they're asking me for more reports that they never read.
Yeah.
Because their boss is asking for a report. That is not good. You need to kind of eject out of that if you can. A lot of times you can't, because you're stuck with the investors, right?
Yeah, it's even worse when you chose your initial investor and then somebody gets swapped out on their investment board, or somebody leaves the fund that you brought it into, and somebody else joins and they've got a totally different personality or presentation type. I've seen that happen as well. So sometimes it just is, against you, and it's just bad luck. But other times it does come down to, why did you choose that investor in the first place? And is there any scope for you to be able to change it? Yeah,
and you would have a hope as well as an investor realize that I'm actually here as a privilege. I've been allowed to come in and join the table to help this company because they have put all their eggs in that basket. This is one of, say, maybe 20 baskets that I have, but show respect to the people who are putting all their eggs in this thing. They're eating it, living it, sleeping it, and be respectful to that. And ask yourself, am I adding any value, or am I just trying to control my investment? If you only don't control your investment, well, step aside, let somebody come in who can actually add value. A non-executive director, much, much better, who's maybe done that, been up that mountain a few times back and forth, right? So much better. But I think sometimes investors become a little bit kind of control freaky. They want to be there because they want to control it. And it's hard for them maybe to say, look, I actually, you know what, this is out of my league. I was good with, whatever the Vauxhall conference they call it in the UK, whatever. This is Premier League, right? Or Champions League. Maybe I should step aside. Or maybe I should invite people that I can learn from as well in this game, yeah? But I think if you haven't done it yourself, if you haven't been running companies, building product, selling product, and you're sitting on the board, you have to ask yourself, well, what am I adding here? You could be a lawyer, which is fantastic, and can provide legal advice. I can provide advice around, whether or not, we're taking the wrong decisions, legally. Or you could be somebody maybe that's a tax expert and so on. But in most cases, you can kind of roll them in and roll them out. Most of the time, you want people on the board that understand how to scale a company, how to strategically, how to think, the chessboard. That's what you want, right? But anyway, most boards are not so functional. And then this is one of the biggest, pains for a lot of entrepreneurs, that they don't feel that they have that support. They go into those meetings feeling like, they're going to be, roasted and not being, supported.
And let's face it, a lot of founders didn't leave their previous job to go work for somebody else, and yet here they are with a board member that was almost worse than their previous boss. I do feel sorry for people who end up in that situation. But I think the key message there is choose your investors, but then also treat them, properly, treat them appropriately, because I do think sometimes founders can be part of their own challenge there, in that they don't treat the investors well, and the investors retaliate, if you like, by saying, oh, give me this, give me that, because that sort of control freak that you said come in, and it's almost like a retaliation for, well, you're not actually supporting me as an investor. Yes,
it's a two-way street, and it's very good that you bring that up, because sometimes I say to founders, like, just do a very simple one-pager of the 5-10 most important KPIs for your business every month. A number of things it does. Number one, it demonstrates to them that you are in control, that you are thinking about these things. Secondly, it gives you the discipline to be in control. So you can ask yourself, like, am I actually, have to stop and run every now and then and look at the compass, right? Am I doing the right thing? Am I running in the right direction?
Yeah.
And respect the fact that people have put money into your company. They tell you that they're betting on you, right? So it's symbiosis. I mean, it has to work both ways for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that I see is delivering those updates on time as requested. So many founders I see, I was a day late, but it's only a day late. It's all right. They're the investors. They understand. But actually, those investors are just as much busy people with their own priorities and schedules as well. And so, yeah, it's some very sort of simple sort of human respect level things there as well.
Absolutely. And this is part of this whole thing that we do at Pichago, of course, is to basically explain on the financials and the metrics and so on. These are the metrics. Start building from scratch a habit of measuring your business and asking yourself these little things. And now these days we have all these systems as well. So most systems, will give you all sorts of analytics from website users to sign up users to financial systems as well are fairly integrated these days. So there's no excuse there. But that brings another point, of course, which is this thing about, I saw some joke in the US, I think it was, that, Europeans, they love financial metrics, and here in the US it's all about growth. But of course it's both, right? So you can't get away from the fact that, yes, it's great product and great technology and so on. But if you can't measure it, you can't manage it and all that stuff, right? It is important just to create a habit of measuring. Funny thing is, when you go running or swimming or cycling and you use, say, Strava, for instance, one of the fun things, with doing that is when you come home and you have your energy drink or whatever and recover, and you bring up and you see, I did best, good in that segment, or compare, to other people and so on. It gives you kind of a feedback loop, and that, so it's kind of satisfaction as well to measure things.
Yes, it does. But it also does rely on that consistency. I've got to cycle that same route every time. So it's comparable between months? Because I think that's another challenge that sometimes we see, is that founders particularly suddenly go, oh, I'm going to measure the business on a different metric this month because it makes more sense. But without providing the sort of, okay, now I'm going to rework the historical metrics to show what that looks like as a trend, which of course breaks if you just switch metrics. And if you do that sort of every 3 months, how's the business going? How can you possibly tell when the metric itself changes baseline every few months as well?
It's difficult. I mean, now also looping back to the AI, there's a lot of debate, of course, right now. How do you measure this thing? How do you measure user engagement? How do we charge for it? Should we charge for this outcome? Should we charge for usage? Or should we have a bit of SaaS, a bit of, subscription? There's a lot of these things going on as well right now. So it is, again, things are changing a little bit, right? So
business models themselves are in question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. I'd love to always wrap up with a bit of a playbook on what we've gone through. And I appreciate that we could probably sit here and talk for hours because it's fascinating to go through a lot of these things with you, Thorgeir. But in terms of, and I know that some of these things are core to pitch Argo, but I think that the things that I've sort of picked out today was, number one, as a founder, know thyself, fairly fundamental. But also number two, which was, know your co-founders really well. I love that suggestion of, going off on a boat trip, sailing trip with them for a couple of weeks, because there's no hiding, there's no getting away from knowing your co-founders at that stage. I think another one that you mentioned there as well was do the homework, be prepared. And then also kind of related to that is keep your investors updated, respect them because they've invested in your business. And then you've got a chance of being respected by them in return. What am I missing out? I'm sure there's one more that I wanted to pick up from there as well. I think the other one was, understand your numbers. Track your numbers, understand your numbers carefully so you can actually see where things are going. Did I miss? I mean, there's obviously a lot more in PitchArgo, and I'm sure that people can go into PitchArgo and go, what is it, 17, 18 metrics that you score?
Well, we have about 16 areas of the business, including actually social responsibility as well. And some people say, oh, why do you have that? I said, well, why not? We talked about that before, right? If you can have a purpose beyond just, making money, that's a good thing. But it's about, initially, it's only 16 questions, a little bit about your company. You get a venture score, tells you a little bit of your maturity level, where you are in your journey, your pre-seed or your seed, a little bit about what you can expect and so on. But then you move on to this kind of deep dive where we made it kind of like a wizard that takes you through and go deeper and deeper, which you can do with your team. You can set off like 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, have a little lunch break and do it together. The idea is to keep you thinking, keep you challenging you. And I think if you do the whole thing, I think it's total, it's probably something like 200 questions. The system generates also actions to say, look, based on how you respond to these, here's an action that you can take that will help you. And then we use AI to say, well, how do you actually execute that action? Well, here's some best practice on how to do that. So yeah, it is some work, but then if you're spending 16 hours a day, whatever, in your startup to carve out, I think in total it takes 2, 3, 4 hours to do this. There's a good investment of your time to do it, because now at least there is this thing about not knowing what you don't know what you don't know, sort of thing. You want to avoid not having a list of things that you don't know. Or what you don't know. So you want to know what you don't know, right? So here's the thing. Okay, I did not know that. Now I know it. Let's do something about it. And again, nobody's perfect. And then when you are pitching and you do your beautiful design pitch with, AI or not, we have also a pitch playbook, that basically takes you through how you should design your pitch and so on.
Right.
You can go with confidence saying like, I'm going to pitch this. Here's the good thing. What I'm pitching is actually true. This is me. So when you open that door and you come in, it looks good, right? I can actually invite people to my house and I know that I am ready, right? I'm ready for people to come and have a look at my house being my startup, right? I've done my own diligence on myself and I'm cool. So that's a good feeling to have. Brings confidence, right? I have a slide for every question. I have everything sorted out, got my data room, all that stuff. So yeah, so that's the purpose.
And confidence is one of those things. When you walk into a meeting like that with confidence, it actually has almost its own charisma attached to that. And it's an amazing aspect of what drives VCs, because they often, yes, of course, they invest in the business idea and they invest in the numbers, but as often as not, they invest in the founder. And that impression of going in with that confidence and that charisma is a significant part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we all know that. If you go back to school when you had tests, you just knew as you sat down at the desk to start the test, you just knew that I'm prepared for this, or I'm really not prepared for this. I didn't really study enough. And Gary Player, whatever the famous golfer said, the more I practice, the luckier I get. So there is a bit of that. But hey, look, I mean, every founder have to make up their own mind how much they want to prepare and how much, most people figure it out. You could get lucky too, right? You can hit the post and it goes in the net, but it's better to put it solidly up in the corner, isn't it? Not hitting any posts. Feels better. I think this is it's kind of a life advice. Yeah, it's kind of life advice as well, isn't it? In general,
be prepared.
Yeah, that's it. Be prepared.
I'm sure that's the Boy Scouts or the Marines or something. Thorgeir, how can people find it? Because I think is it pitchago.com? pitchago.com?
.com, exactly. And on there you have initial assessment. You just spend like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to go through. There's also a section for accelerators and incubators and advisors. To basically have a portal where you can invite people to do an initial assessment, and they end up in your space and you can see them, you can have a conversation with them and so on. So we built this portal as well for them. We have accelerators and incubators using the product. What we're seeing is that they feel like they're more structured, they don't miss anything. And the combination of having a real life coach with a system like this is really great combination. Again, it's that thing, if I can walk up the hill, it's good to talk to somebody who's been there before, but it's also good to have my own little checklist, right? Because even coaches, if you're lucky, you get a go-to coach, but some coaches, forget. And some people are like, well, I've been a coach for this kind of startup, maybe not exactly yours. Okay. So it's good to have second opinions, right?
And I think increasingly with AI being able to play a role in that's also happening from there as well. So I think that's another key element to being able to go through your product and get some of the Q&A from the AI bank of knowledge as well at the same time. No,
exactly. And we were building this, and I think, general AI tools are fantastic. It's just that we want to have a repository where we collect everything in one place so you can keep coming back to it. And we're evolving this thing as well with memory and context. So this is the way the future for this platform is. We're thinking of it as like your startup buddy that'll be there for you, that knows you more and more. So we're applying a lot of these technologies right now. It's quite fun to be both advising startups, but also we're building products, which is helps you to be. Yeah, I feel sometimes I'm kind of like a playing coach. I'm coaching teams how to win their games, but I'm also on there out in this field kicking the ball, right? And right now, you have to. I've seen a lot of founders actually on bigger companies, larger companies, who basically have quit their management roles and basically said, "Look, I need to become an IC again, right? So I might be still CEO, but in the evenings I'm coding. I'm back to coding."
I'm working with several organizations who have got CEOs in exactly the same situation. Yeah,
because they'll feel like, gosh, you know what? I feel like I'm irrelevant. I cannot set requirements on my team anymore unless I understand how the black box works, right? So I need to get in there, which I think is fantastic. This is.
And to be clear, it's not so that they can get back on the critical path. It's mainly so that they can critically question the people within their team, but also credibly ask things of them.
Well, it reminds us of a famous entrepreneur, right? Who builds rockets and stuff like that, They can walk down to the floor and say, that's not how you make a shield for heat. Okay, sir. But very few can do that. But I think, a lot of CEOs, I think, are getting that kind of, healthy paranoia that, look, I need to get back into this. So personally, for me to work with product and advising companies at the same time gives me the confidence to say, look, you know what? We tried this, we tried that. Maybe you should try that. Or I'm picking up things when I go out to work with helping startups, raise money. We go through their products. I'm like, that's a really clever thing. We should use that for Pitchago. So it's kind of this is the wonderful thing about startups, by the way, in meetups, is that you learn so much from one another, right? And you realize also that, I'm not the only one fighting. There are others, like me.
Yeah. It's the central tenet to the CTO playbook is that the community is a key part of your resource toolkit.
Like you do with the CTO craft, which is fantastic. I've been, coming to some of your events as well.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to see that kind of, people nodding like, yeah, been there. And then afterwards, when there's a little break, they go and talk to each other. So like, you can see how they all of a sudden, feel like, we should talk, we should spend some more time, we should show, do some code sharing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Thor, I asked you last time. I always love asking this. One tip you can provide for any CTO at the moment who's coming into this environment and looking at raising money.
Well, we talked about this before. The one tip is, I think, not to shield yourself from the business. Insist that you're part of customer conversations. Listen to the customers, the users. Try to be one. Use your own software. Try to understand why we're building this, the whole purpose of it. I think this is the key thing, right? So it is easy to become totally kind of engrossed and disappear in the technology chat, right? Which is fun, but pull yourself out a little bit and zoom out, see why are we building this? Would I use it? Would I eat my own dog food kind of thing, and where do I think we should take this, to the next level? But especially now with cycles being so short of going from idea to actually first MVP on the software side. I mean, even on the hardware side, we'll say that you can CAD/CAM stuff and 3D print and all that so quickly. So, but yeah, I think that's one thing. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then the question I guess you should ask yourself is why not? Is it because, well, I haven't done it before? I don't feel like, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not, doesn't matter. If you're passionate about your product, then you want to know how people use it, right?
Cool. Fantastic, Thorgeir. We're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you very much. And
thank you again.
If people want to reach you, where can they, sort of LinkedIn, or where's the best place to reach you?
LinkedIn, absolutely. And I'm one of the few people on LinkedIn that actually have my email address on my contacts. So Thorgeir Einarsson, Thorgeir Einarsson, Einarsson. Thorgeir@pitchago.com. This is the best way. Yeah.
Excellent. We'll put those links into the show notes as well.
Thank you very much.
Thorgeir, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the whole episode. I appreciate your time. So just before you go, I'd like to ask you for a favor in return for putting together this episode of the CTO Playbook for you. Please share the episode with just one person who will appreciate it. Wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or another platform, sharing the episode will help more CTOs find the podcast and enable me to create more great content. Remember that you can find more information on the CTOplaybook.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the CTO Playbook.